the bullet that grazed Flora Jenkins's shoulder in the dusty streets of Sierra City, California, in the spring of 1878 was meant for someone else entirely, but it changed her life forever. She had been walking from the general store where she worked, carrying a small sack of flour she had purchased with her meager wages when the shooting started outside the saloon. Men were shouting, guns were firing, and before Flora could find cover, the searing pain tore through her shoulder. She dropped to the ground, her vision blurring as the flour sack burst open beside her, creating a white cloud that mixed with the dust of the street. Through the haze of pain, she heard more gunfire, then running footsteps. Strong hands lifted her, and a deep voice said, "I have got you. Stay with me now." Flora tried to focus on the face above her, but everything was swimming. She felt herself being carried, heard a door open, and then she was being laid down on something soft. The pain in her shoulder was overwhelming, radiating down her arm and across her chest. "Doc Miller," the voice was calling. "We need you here now." Flora's eyes fluttered open, and she finally saw her rescuer clearly. He was tall with dark hair that fell to his collar, wearing a dusty brown coat and a hat he had just tossed aside. His face was lean and weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep brown and filled with genuine concern as he looked down at her. "What is your name?" he asked gently, pressing a cloth against her shoulder to stop the bleeding. "Flora," she managed to whisper. "Flora Jenkins." "I am Gabriel Ross," he said. "You are going to be all right, Flora. The doctor is coming." An older man with spectacles and a black medical bag hurried into the room, which Flora now realized was one of the boarding house rooms. Gabriel stepped back to give the doctor space but did not leave. "Let me see," Doc Miller said, carefully examining the wound. "The bullet went clean through." "You are lucky, miss. A few inches to the right and we would be having a very different conversation." The next hour passed in a blur of pain as the doctor cleaned and bandaged the wound. Gabriel stayed the entire time, and when Flora cried out, she felt his hand take hers, squeezing gently to give her something to focus on besides the pain. When it was finally over, Doc Miller gave her laudanum for the pain and strict instructions to rest. "You will need someone to look after you for a few days," he said, looking at Gabriel. "She should not be alone." "I will make sure she is cared for," Gabriel said without hesitation. Flora wanted to protest, but the laudanum was already pulling her under. Her last thought before sleep took her was that she did not even know this man, and yet she trusted him completely. When Flora woke, it was dark outside. A lamp burned low on the table beside the bed, and Gabriel sat in a chair nearby, his long legs stretched out in front of him, his hat tipped forward over his face. She studied him in the lamplight, wondering who he was and why he had helped her. As if sensing her gaze, Gabriel stirred and looked up, pushing his hat back. "You are awake," he said, sitting up straighter. "How are you feeling?" "It hurts," Flora admitted, "but not as badly as before." Gabriel stood and poured water from a pitcher into a glass, then helped her sit up enough to drink. His touch was gentle, careful not to jar her injured shoulder. When she had drunk her fill, he eased her back down. "Thank you," Flora said. "You did not have to do all this." "Yes, I did," Gabriel replied simply. "You were hurt. I could not just leave you in the street. But to stay with me, to pay for the doctor and this room, it is too much. I cannot repay you." Gabriel pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. "I do not want repayment. I want you to get better." Flora studied his face, trying to understand. In her experience, men did not do things without expecting something in return. "Why?" she asked. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because when I saw you fall, Something in me could not bear the thought of you being hurt." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that made Flora's heart skip. She had never had anyone speak to her like that before, with such honest concern. "I work at Henley's general store," Flora said, needing to fill the silence. "I live in a small room behind it. Mr. Henley, he will be wondering where I am." "I sent word to him," Gabriel said. "Told him you were injured and would need a few days to recover." "He said to take all the time you need." Flora doubted that. Mr. Henley was not known for his generosity. More likely, he had said she could take the time but would not be paid for it. The thought of losing even a few days' wages made her stomach clench with anxiety. She had so little as it was. Gabriel seemed to read her thoughts. "Do not worry about money right now," he said. "Just focus on healing." "I have to worry about money," Flora said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I have to eat. I have to pay rent. I cannot afford to just rest." "Then let me help you," Gabriel said. "I cannot accept charity," Flora protested, even as tears of frustration pricked her eyes. "I will not be beholden to anyone." Gabriel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression earnest. "It is not charity, Flora. It is one human being helping another. You would do the same if our positions were reversed, would you not?" She wanted to argue, but she was too tired and too overwhelmed. The truth was, she had no idea what she would do. No one had ever cared enough about her to find out. Flora had grown up in an orphanage in San Francisco after her parents died of fever when she was 6. She had few memories of them, just impressions of warmth and safety that felt like dreams. The orphanage had been crowded and cold, run by a stern woman who believed discipline was more important than kindness. When Flora turned 16, she had been sent out to work, and she had been working ever since, moving from job to job, town to town, always just barely scraping by. She had arrived in Sierra City 6 months ago, tired and nearly penniless. Mr. Henley had hired her to work in his store, and she had been grateful for even that small mercy. The work was hard and the pay was poor, but it was better than starving. She had learned long ago not to expect much from life, not to hope for more than survival. And now here was this stranger, this man named Gabriel Ross, offering her kindness she did not know how to accept. "Rest now," Gabriel said softly. "We can talk more tomorrow." Flora wanted to stay awake, to figure out what to make of this situation, but the laudanum and her own exhaustion pulled her back under. This time, her sleep was deeper, and she did not dream. Over the next 3 days, Gabriel barely left her side. He brought her meals, changed her bandages when the doctor showed him how, and sat with her through the long hours. They talked, tentatively at first, and then more freely as Flora began to trust him. She learned that Gabriel was a rancher who owned land about 10 miles outside of Sierra City. He had come to town for supplies when the shooting started. He told her about his ranch, about the cattle he raised and the horses he bred. There was pride in his voice when he spoke of his work, but also a loneliness that Flora recognized because she felt it too. "You have family?" Flora asked him on the 3rd day when she was feeling well enough to sit up in bed without too much pain. Gabriel shook his head. "My parents died years ago. It was just me and my brother, but he headed east to find work in the cities. I stayed and built the ranch. It is a good life, but it is a solitary one." "I understand solitary," Flora said quietly. Gabriel looked at her with those deep brown eyes. "Tell me about yourself, Flora. Where did you come from? What brought you to Sierra City?" So Flora told him. She told him about the orphanage, about the years of working in different towns, about always being alone. She told him things she had never told anyone, and Gabriel listened without judgment, without pity, just with genuine interest and compassion. "That must have been very hard," Gabriel said when she finished. It was all I knew, Flora replied. I learned early not to expect much. That way I could not be disappointed. That is no way to live, Gabriel said gently. It is the only way I know how to live, Flora said. On the fourth day, Doc Miller declared that Flora was healing well and could return to her own room if she was careful. Flora felt both relief and an unexpected sadness at the news. These days with Gabriel had been strange and wonderful, like existing in a bubble outside of real life. But now real life was calling her back. Gabriel helped her gather her few belongings and walked her back to the general store. The tiny room behind the store was barely big enough for a narrow bed and a small dresser, with a single window that looked out onto an alley. After the comfort of the boarding house room, it felt especially bleak. Gabriel looked around the space, his expression troubled. Flora, you cannot stay here. This is not suitable for someone recovering from an injury. It is what I have, Flora said, defensive despite herself. Then let me offer you something better, Gabriel said. Come to the ranch, stay in the guest room while you finish healing. I promise you will be safe and well cared for. Flora stared at him. I cannot do that, it would not be proper. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, lives on the property with her husband. They manage the house and help with the ranch. You would be properly chaperoned, Gabriel said. Please, Flora, let me do this for you. Flora wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her not to depend on this man, not to let herself believe that his kindness could last. But the pain in her shoulder was still sharp, and the thought of trying to work in the store, lifting and carrying things, made her want to cry. Why are you doing this? Flora asked again, her voice breaking. Why do you care? Gabriel stepped closer, his eyes intense. Because from the moment I saw you, something changed. I cannot explain it, Flora, but I feel like I have been waiting for you without even knowing it. I know that sounds foolish, but it is the truth. Flora's breath caught. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. You do not even know me, she whispered. Then let me know you, Gabriel said. Come to the ranch. Let me show you that there are good people in this world, people who will care for you without wanting anything in return. And if I come to care for you too? Flora asked, surprised by her own boldness. What then? Gabriel smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warm and beautiful. Then I would be the luckiest man alive. Flora made her decision. All right, she said, I will come, but only until I am fully healed. Only until then, Gabriel agreed, though something in his eyes told Flora he hoped it would be longer. They left the next morning in Gabriel's wagon, with Flora's few possessions tucked behind the seat. Mr. Henley had not been pleased about her leaving, but Gabriel had paid him a month's wages for Flora, and the storekeeper could not argue with cash in hand. The ride to the ranch took them through beautiful country, rolling hills covered in spring grass and dotted with oak trees. The sky was endlessly blue, and the air smelled of wildflowers and earth. Flora, who had spent most of her life in cramped city streets or dusty town squares, felt something loosen in her chest as they traveled. It is beautiful, she said softly. Yes, Gabriel agreed, but when Flora glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the landscape. The ranch appeared as they crested a hill, a sprawling property with a well-built house, a large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Flora could see horses in one of the nearer pastures. It was more prosperous than she had expected, evidence of years of hard work and careful management. Mrs. Chen met them at the house, a small, efficient woman in her 50s with keen eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Her husband, Y. Chen, came from the barn, a quiet man with strong hands and a gentle smile. They welcomed Flora warmly, and Mrs. Chen immediately took charge, showing Flora to the guest room and fussing over her injury. The room was more comfortable than anywhere Flora had ever stayed. It had a real bed with a thick mattress and clean sheets, a dresser with a mirror, a chair by the window, and curtains that moved gently in the breeze. Flora stood in the middle of it, overwhelmed. "Is it all right?" Gabriel asked from the doorway, watching her with concern. "It is more than all right," Flora said, turning to face him. "It is too much. I do not deserve this." Gabriel crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just in front of her. He looked at her with such intensity that Flora felt her knees weaken. "Do not say that," he said firmly. "You deserve good things, Flora. You deserve kindness and comfort and everything else you have been denied." "You do not understand," Flora said, tears welling up despite her best efforts to hold them back. "I have never had anything like this. I do not know how to accept it. I feel like I will wake up and it will all be gone." Gabriel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "It is not a dream," he said softly. "I am real. This place is real, and you are worthy of being here." Flora closed her eyes, letting herself feel the warmth of his hand against her face. When she opened them again, Gabriel was still there, still looking at her like she was something precious. "Thank you," Flora whispered. Gabriel smiled. "Rest now. We will have supper in a few hours and you can meet everyone properly." Over the next few weeks, Flora healed in body and spirit. The ranch was a revelation to her, a place of purpose and life. She watched Gabriel work with the cattle and horses, saw the respect Y. Chen had for him, and the affection Mrs. Chen showed him. She learned that Gabriel was a fair employer, that he paid his ranch hands well and treated them with dignity. The few hands who worked for him spoke of him with genuine loyalty, not fear or resentment. Gabriel spent every evening with Flora, sitting with her on the porch as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build something lasting and good. Flora told him about her secret love of reading, how she had taught herself from newspapers and dime novels, and Gabriel immediately gave her access to his small but well-chosen library. They talked about the world, about politics and progress, about the injustices they had seen. Gabriel spoke with anger about the way the native tribes had been treated, about the violence and broken promises. Flora told him about the prejudice she had witnessed toward people like the Chens, the casual cruelty that was too often accepted. "The world can be a hard place," Gabriel said one evening as they sat watching the stars come out. "But I believe we can make our corner of it better. We can treat people with respect and kindness. We can build something good." "You already have," Flora said, gesturing at the ranch spread out before them. "Not just the ranch," Gabriel said, turning to look at her. "You being here, it has made everything better." Flora felt her heart race. Over these weeks, she had tried to deny what she was feeling, tried to tell herself it was just gratitude. But she knew it was more. She was falling in love with Gabriel Ross, with his kindness and his strength, with the way he looked at her like she mattered. "Gabriel," she said hesitantly, "when I am fully healed, what happens then?" Gabriel was quiet for a moment. "That depends on you," he said finally. "What do you want to happen?" Flora took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I do not want to leave," she admitted. "But I cannot stay here indefinitely as a guest. It would not be right." "Then stay as something else," Gabriel said, reaching over and taking her hand. "Stay as my partner. Stay as my wife." Flora's breath stopped. "What?" Gabriel shifted to face her fully, his hand still holding hers. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a short time, but Flora, I have never been more sure of anything. I love you. I love your strength and your intelligence and your courage. I love the way you see the world and the way you make me want to be better. Marry me. Stay here with me. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you that you deserve every good thing." Flora felt tears streaming down her face. "I am not worthy of this," she said, her voice breaking. "Gabriel, you have so much to offer and I have nothing. I am just an orphan with no family, no money, no connections. You could do so much better." Gabriel cupped her face in both his hands, his eyes blazing with emotion. "You are worthy of everything good this world has," he said fiercely. "Do you hear me, Flora? Everything. And if you will have me, I will spend every day proving it to you." Flora searched his face, looking for doubt or uncertainty, but found only love and absolute conviction. Slowly, wonderingly, she let herself believe it. This was real. This man loved her. She was worthy of being loved. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Gabriel's smile was brilliant, and then he was kissing her, gentle and reverent, like she was something infinitely precious. Flora kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love into it, finally letting herself believe in a future that held more than just survival. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Sierra City, with Mrs. and Mr. Chen as their witnesses and a handful of Gabriel's ranch hands in attendance. Flora wore a new dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, a simple blue cotton that made her eyes bright. Gabriel wore his best suit, and the way he looked at Flora as she walked toward him made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The circuit preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Gabriel kissed her, Flora felt like her life was finally beginning. The first months of their marriage were filled with discovery and joy. Gabriel was a patient and gentle husband, always making sure Flora felt safe and cherished. Flora learned the rhythms of ranch life, helping Mrs. Chen with the household and tending a garden she started behind the house. She was not experienced in domestic work beyond the most basic tasks, but Mrs. Chen was a patient teacher and Flora was a quick learner. More than that, Flora was happy. Truly, deeply happy in a way she had never imagined possible. She would wake up in the morning next to Gabriel and have to remind herself that this was her life now, that she was not going to wake up in some cold, lonely room. Gabriel seemed equally happy. He would come in from working the ranch and sweep Flora into his arms, kissing her like he had been away for years instead of hours. He told her he loved her every day multiple times, like he could not quite believe his good fortune either. But as summer turned to fall, Flora began to struggle with feelings she could not quite name. She was so grateful for everything Gabriel had given her, for the life they were building together, but sometimes the weight of that gratitude felt crushing. She felt like she had to be perfect, had to earn the love he gave so freely. She pushed herself to do more, to be more, until Mrs. Chen finally pulled her aside one afternoon. "You are going to work yourself sick," Mrs. Chen said bluntly. "Why are you doing this to yourself?" Flora did not know how to explain it, but she tried. "I just want to be worthy of him," she said. "He has given me so much and I want to give back." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Child marriage is not about earning love, it is about sharing it. Gabriel does not want a servant or someone who feels indebted to him. He wants a partner, an equal. He wants you." "But I am not his equal," Flora protested. "He owns all this, he built all this, I came with nothing." "You came with yourself," Mrs. Chen said firmly, "and that is enough. More than enough. You need to believe that, Flora, or you will drive yourself and Gabriel crazy." That night, Flora tried to explain her feelings to Gabriel as they lay in bed. She expected him to dismiss her concerns, to tell her she was being foolish, but instead he pulled her close and held her. "I understand," he said quietly. "When my parents died and left me the ranch, I felt like I had to prove I deserved it. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to live up to what I thought they would want. It took me years to realize that I did not have to earn the gift they had given me. I just had to accept it with gratitude and do my best." "How did you stop feeling like you had to prove yourself?" Flora asked. I am not sure I ever completely did, Gabriel admitted, but I learned to focus less on proving and more on building. Instead of worrying about whether I deserved the ranch, I started thinking about what I wanted to create with it. The same is true for us, Flora. Do not worry about whether you deserve my love. Just love me back and help me build a life that makes us both happy. Flora thought about that for a long time. I do love you, she said finally. So much it frightens me sometimes. I am afraid I will lose you. You will not lose me, Gabriel promised. I am not going anywhere. We are in this together for the rest of our lives. Flora let herself relax against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. For the rest of our lives, she repeated, letting the words sink in. The next day, Flora made a conscious effort to approach her work differently. Instead of pushing herself to exhaustion, she worked steadily and took breaks when she needed them. She let herself enjoy the tasks she did instead of treating them like debts to be paid. And when Gabriel came in for lunch, she let herself simply enjoy his company instead of worrying about whether she was being a good enough wife. Gabriel noticed the change immediately. You seem lighter, he said, studying her face. I am trying to take your advice, Flora said. Focusing on building instead of proving. Gabriel smiled and pulled her into his arms. I am proud of you, he said. I know that is not easy. It gets easier when I remember I am not alone, Flora said, resting her head against his chest. That I have you. Always, Gabriel promised. As winter approached, Flora discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had been afraid to hope, afraid to believe that she could have this too. When Doc Miller confirmed it during his visit to the ranch to check on one of the hands who had injured his leg, Flora felt overwhelming joy mixed with terror. She told Gabriel that evening as they sat by the fire. He had been reading and she had been pretending to sew, but her hands were shaking too badly to make neat stitches. Gabriel, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up immediately, setting his book aside. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong, Flora said quickly. At least I do not think so. Gabriel, I am going to have a baby. For a moment, Gabriel just stared at her. Then he was across the room, pulling her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. A baby, he kept saying. We are going to have a baby. Flora clung to him, letting his joy wash over her. Are you happy? She asked, needing to hear him say it. Happy does not begin to cover it, Gabriel said, pulling back to look at her. Flora, you have given me everything. A partner, a true home, and now a child. I am the most blessed man alive. I am frightened, Flora admitted. I do not know how to be a mother. I never had one, not really. Gabriel took her face in his hands. You will be a wonderful mother, he said with absolute certainty. You have so much love to give, Flora. Our child will be so lucky to have you. Over the winter months, as Flora's belly grew, Gabriel was endlessly attentive. He brought her tea when she felt nauseated in the mornings, rubbed her feet when they ached in the evenings, and talked to the baby through her belly, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the life they would have. Mrs. Chen was equally attentive, making sure Flora ate properly and rested enough. She shared stories about her own children, grown now and living in San Francisco, and gave Flora advice about what to expect. Flora felt the baby move for the first time in late January, a flutter like butterfly wings inside her. She grabbed Gabriel's hand and pressed it to her belly, and when he felt it too, his face lit up with wonder. Hello, little one, he said softly. We are so excited to meet you. The baby was born in early May, on a morning when the air smelled of apple blossoms and fresh grass. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Flora was certain she could not bear it. But Gabriel stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, encouraging her, and when their son finally arrived with a lusty cry, Flora felt a rush of love so powerful it stole her breath. "A boy," Doc Miller announced, placing the baby in Flora's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Gabriel looked at his son with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Flora, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Samuel Gabriel Ross, Samuel after Gabriel's father. He had dark hair like Gabriel and blue eyes like Flora. And from the first moment, he held their hearts completely. The early weeks with Samuel were exhausting and overwhelming, but also filled with joy. Flora had worried she would not know how to care for a baby, but she discovered that love made up for lack of experience. She learned to read Samuel's cries, to know when he was hungry or tired or just needed to be held. Gabriel was a devoted father, walking with Samuel at night when he fussed, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice, and looking at him with such love that Flora would sometimes have to look away because it was too much, too beautiful. Mrs. Chen helped enormously, teaching Flora how to care for the baby and giving her permission to rest when she needed it. "The first few months are the hardest," she said, "but it gets easier, I promise." Summer came, and Samuel grew stronger and more alert. He would watch his father with wide eyes, and when Gabriel spoke to him, he would make happy sounds in response. Flora would sit on the porch, nursing Samuel and watching Gabriel work with the horses, and feel so content she almost could not believe it was real. One evening, when Samuel was about 3 months old, Gabriel found Flora sitting in the rocking chair in the nursery, tears streaming down her face as she held their sleeping son. "Flora, what is wrong?" Gabriel asked, immediately kneeling beside the chair. "Nothing is wrong," Flora said, smiling through her tears. "Everything is so right, and I keep thinking about the girl I was a year ago, so alone and convinced that life would never be more than just surviving. And now I have you and Samuel and this beautiful life, and sometimes it overwhelms me." Gabriel wiped her tears gently. "I know what you mean," he said. "Sometimes I look at you and our son and I feel so grateful I can barely breathe. We are very lucky, Flora." "I do not think it is luck," Flora said thoughtfully. "I think it is love. Love changes everything." "Yes," Gabriel agreed softly. "It does." As Samuel grew into a toddler, the ranch prospered. Gabriel's careful management and fair treatment of his workers had built a reputation, and he was able to expand his herd and improve the quality of his horses. Flora took on more responsibility in managing the household accounts, discovering she had a head for numbers and organization. She and Gabriel made decisions together, true partners in every sense. Samuel was a happy, curious child who loved following his father around the ranch. By the time he was 2, he was toddling after Gabriel, trying to copy everything he did. Gabriel was endlessly patient, explaining things to Samuel in simple terms and letting him help with small tasks. Flora watched them together and felt her heart swell with love. This was what she had never dared to dream of: a real family, people who loved each other and supported each other. When Samuel was 3, Flora discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less frightened and more excited, eager to give Samuel a sibling. Gabriel was thrilled, and Samuel was fascinated by the idea of a baby, constantly asking questions and wanting to feel the baby move. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1882, an easy birth compared to Samuel's. She had red gold hair and green eyes, and they named her Grace Elizabeth. Grace after Flora's mother, whose name she had learned from old orphanage records Mrs. Chen had helped her track down. Samuel was enchanted with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Flora had to watch him carefully to make sure he did not try to pick her up on his own, but his love for Grace was evident from the start. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The children grew, The ranch prospered, and Flora and Gabriel's love deepened with every passing year. There were hard times too, a drought one summer that tested their resources. A winter when Grace was seriously ill with a fever that terrified them all, moments of doubt and fear. But they faced everything together, and their partnership only grew stronger. When Samuel was 8 and Grace was 5, Flora started teaching them to read and write, using the skills she had taught herself and the books from Gabriel's ever-growing library. Gabriel would join them in the evenings, and their small dining room would become a classroom, filled with questions and laughter and learning. Flora also became involved in the community in ways she had never imagined. She joined with other ranch wives to start a small school in Sierra City, knowing there were children who needed education. She spoke up at town meetings about the need for better medical facilities and fair treatment for all residents, regardless of their background. Gabriel supported her fully, proud of her growing confidence and her commitment to making their community better one day. When Flora was in town for a school committee meeting, she ran into Mr. Henley, her former employer at the general store. He barely recognized her. The thin, frightened girl who had worked for him had been replaced by a confident woman in a well-made dress, with color in her cheeks and light in her eyes. "Mrs. Ross," he said, tipping his hat awkwardly. "Mr. Henley," Flora replied politely. "I hear you and your husband have done very well," Henley said, and there was something in his tone that might have been resentment. "We have been blessed," Flora said simply. "We work hard and treat people fairly, and we have built a good life." "Must be nice," Henley said, "to have everything handed to you." Flora felt a flash of anger, but she kept her voice calm. "Nothing was handed to me, Mr. Henley. I worked for everything I have, just like I worked for you. The difference is that I found someone who valued that work, who saw me as a partner rather than just cheap labor." She walked away before he could respond, her head held high. Later, when she told Gabriel about the encounter, he pulled her close. "I am proud of you," he said, "for standing up for yourself, for knowing your worth." "You taught me that," Flora said. "You showed me that I was worthy of respect and love." "No," Gabriel said gently. "I just helped you see what was already there. You were always worthy, Flora, always." The years continued to pass, bringing change and growth. Samuel grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, working alongside Gabriel and learning everything about managing the land and livestock. Grace was more interested in books and ideas, always asking questions about the world beyond the ranch. Flora encouraged both of them to follow their interests, remembering her own childhood where curiosity had often been discouraged. When Samuel was 16, he asked his father about starting his own small herd, wanting to prove he could manage cattle on his own. Gabriel agreed, giving him a corner of the ranch to work with. Samuel threw himself into the project with determination, and Gabriel watched proudly as his son demonstrated the same work ethic and integrity that had built the Ross Ranch. Grace, at 13, announced that she wanted to become a teacher. "Like you, Mama," she said. "I want to help children learn, especially those who do not have anyone else to teach them." Flora felt tears prick her eyes. "That is a wonderful dream," she said. "We will do everything we can to help you achieve it." "Did you always want to teach?" Grace asked. Flora thought about that. "No," she said honestly. "When I was your age, I did not think about what I wanted. I only thought about surviving. It was not until I met your father that I started to believe I could want things, could dream of more than just getting by." "That is sad," Grace said, her young face serious. "It was," Flora agreed. "But it also makes me grateful for what I have now. It taught me never to take this life for granted, to appreciate every day with you and Samuel and your father." Grace hugged her mother tightly. "I am glad Papa found you," she said. "I am glad we are a family." "Me too, sweetheart," Flora whispered. "Me too." That night, as Flora and Gabriel lay in bed, she told him about the conversation with Grace. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life," she said. "That I have children who feel safe enough to dream, who have never known what it is like to go to bed hungry or to be alone in the world." "You gave them that," Gabriel said. "Your love and your strength gave them that security." "We gave them that," Flora corrected. "Together." Gabriel pulled her close and Flora rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. After all these years, it still made her feel safe, still made her feel home. "You ever regret it?" Flora asked quietly. "Marrying me?" "Sometimes I wonder if you would have been better off with someone from a good family, someone with a proper upbringing." Gabriel tilted her face up to look at him. "Never," he said fiercely. "Not once, not for a single moment. Flora, you are everything I could have wanted and more. You are my partner, my love, the mother of my children. You made me better than I was. How could I ever regret that?" "I love you," Flora whispered. "I love you too," Gabriel said. "More than words can say." When Flora was 45 and Gabriel was 47, they became grandparents. Samuel had married a sweet young woman named Anna from a neighboring ranch, and they had a son they named Gabriel, after his grandfather. Flora held her grandson for the first time and felt the circle complete, from orphan to mother to grandmother, from alone to surrounded by family. Gabriel stood beside her, his arm around her waist, looking at their grandson with wonder. "He has your eyes," he told Flora. "And Samuel's nose," Flora said, laughing. "Poor child." Samuel and Anna had built a small house on the ranch, and the extended family would gather for Sunday dinners, the table overflowing with food and conversation and laughter. Grace, now studying to be a teacher in Sacramento but home for the summer, would regale them with stories of city life. Young Gabriel would be passed from lap to lap, soaking up the attention. Flora would look around the table at these people she loved, this family she had somehow been blessed with, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the girl she had been, standing in that dusty street in Sierra City, bleeding and alone and certain that life would always be hard and lonely. That girl could never have imagined this future. One evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Flora and Gabriel sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the air smelled of summer grass and wildflowers. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, taking her hand. "That day in Sierra City," Flora said, "when you found me in the street. Do you remember?" "Of course I remember," Gabriel said. "It was the most important day of my life." "Mine too," Flora said. "Everything changed that day." "You changed my whole life, Gabriel. We changed each other's lives," Gabriel said. "I was existing before I met you, but I was not really living. You taught me what it meant to share my life with someone, to be truly vulnerable and open. You made me better." Flora squeezed his hand. "I spent so many years thinking I was not worthy of good things," she said. "That I had to earn every scrap of kindness, that I did not deserve to be happy. And then you came along and just gave me everything, freely and completely, and it changed how I saw myself. You taught me that I was worthy just as I was." "You were always worthy," Gabriel said softly. "I just helped you see it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. The stars began to appear one by one until the sky was full of them. Flora leaned her head on Gabriel's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body next to hers, and felt completely at peace. "I would do it all again," Gabriel said suddenly. "Every moment, every decision that led me to that street on that day, I would do it all exactly the same just to find you." Flora turned to look at him, seeing the love in his eyes, the same love that had been there from the beginning. "So would I," she whispered. "Even the hard parts, the lonely years, they led me to you, and that makes everything worthwhile." Gabriel kissed her, gentle and sweet, a kiss that held decades of love and partnership and shared life. When they pulled apart, Flora smiled at him, this man who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, who had loved her into believing she deserved to be loved. "Come inside," Gabriel said, standing and offering her his hand. "It is getting cold." Flora took his hand, letting him pull her up, and together they walked into the house they had made a home, into the life they had built together, into the love that had saved them both. Years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren and new challenges and endless joys. Grace married a fellow teacher and had twin girls who inherited their mother's love of learning and their grandmother's determination. Samuel and Anna had 2 more children, daughters who were as wild and fearless as their brother was steady and responsible. The ranch continued to prosper under the combined management of Gabriel and Samuel, with Flora keeping the books and making sure everything ran smoothly. They had weathered economic downturns and harsh winters, but the foundation Gabriel had built was strong, and the Ross family was known throughout the region for their integrity and fair dealing. Flora became a grandmother figure to many in the community, not just her own grandchildren. She worked with the school board, helped establish a library in Sierra City, and became known as someone who would always help those in need. She had not forgotten what it was like to be alone and struggling, and she made sure that anyone who needed assistance could come to her. When Flora was 52, she received a letter that shook her to her core. It was from a lawyer in San Francisco, informing her that a distant relative she had never known existed had died and left her a small inheritance. More importantly, the lawyer had enclosed information about her parents, who they had been, where they had come from, details Flora had never known. She sat in the parlor, reading and rereading the documents, tears streaming down her face. Gabriel found her there and immediately sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. "What is wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Nothing is wrong," Flora said, laughing through her tears. "Gabriel, I have family history. I know where I came from. My mother was a teacher, did you know that? And my father was a carpenter. They were good people and they loved me. I have always known that, felt it somehow, but now I know for certain." Gabriel held her as she cried, tears of grief for the parents she had lost and tears of joy for finally knowing who they had been. Later, she shared the information with Samuel and Grace, giving them a connection to their grandparents they had never expected to have. "You see," Gabriel told their children, "your mother came from good people, people who valued education and hard work and doing right by others. Those values live on in her, and now in you." Flora saw Grace and Samuel look at her with new eyes, seeing not just their mother but the daughter of parents who had loved her, the continuation of a legacy. It was a gift she had never expected, and it healed something in her she had not realized was still broken. As Flora and Gabriel moved into their 60s, they began to slowly hand over the daily management of the ranch to Samuel, though Gabriel remained involved and consulted on all major decisions. They spent more time with their grandchildren, teaching them to ride and raid and think for themselves. Grace had moved back to Sierra City to run the school they had helped establish, and her twins were often at the ranch, learning from their grandparents. Flora started writing down her story, wanting her grandchildren and their children to know where she had come from and how she had found her way to this life. She wrote about the orphanage and the hard years, but also about the kindness of strangers, the value of hope, and the transformative power of love. Grace read it and encouraged her to continue. "This is important, Mama," Grace said. "Not just for our family, but for others who might feel the way you once did, who might think they are not worthy of good things." So Flora kept writing, and eventually her memoir was published by a small press in San Francisco. It did not become a bestseller, but it touched the people who read it, and Flora received letters from women who said her story had given them hope. That meant more to Flora than any amount of money or fame could have. Gabriel was immensely proud of Flora, telling everyone he met about his wife's book. "She is an author," he would say with a grin that made Flora blush and laugh. "She is amazing." When Gabriel turned 70, the family threw a large celebration at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the region. The yard was full of people eating and talking and celebrating, and Gabriel stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, with Flora by his side, and felt completely content. "Thank you," he told Flora quietly as they watched Samuel's youngest daughter, barely 3 years old, toddling around the yard. "For all of this, for our life together." "Thank you," Flora replied, "for finding me, for loving me, for showing me that I was worthy of everything good this world has to offer." "You are," Gabriel said, pulling her close and kissing the top of her head. "You always were, and you always will be." They stood together, watching their family, the family they had created through love and persistence and unwavering faith in each other. Flora thought about the moment Gabriel had first told her she was worthy of everything good, how those words had changed her life. She had spent years learning to believe them, and now, at 65 years old, she finally did, completely and without reservation. She was worthy. She had always been worthy, and she had been blessed beyond measure to find someone who had seen that truth when she could not. As the sun set on Gabriel's birthday celebration, the family gathered for a photograph, everyone crowding together in front of the house. Flora and Gabriel sat in the center, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, 8 in total now, with another on the way. The photographer counted down, and just before he took the picture, Gabriel leaned over and whispered in Flora's ear, "I love you, my worthy one." Flora smiled, her hand finding Gabriel's and squeezing tight. "I love you too, my savior and my home." The photograph captured that moment, Flora and Gabriel looking at each other with such love and contentment that everyone who saw the picture could not help but smile. It was a testament to what they had built, a life founded on love and respect and the belief that everyone deserved kindness and dignity. The years passed gently after that. Gabriel and Flora grew older together, their hair turning white, their movements slower but their love undimmed. They would sit on the porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset, content in the silence of long companionship. Sometimes they would talk about the early days, marveling at how young they had been, how uncertain. But mostly they would simply exist together, present in each moment, grateful for every day. When Gabriel was 75, he became ill with a fever that would not break. Doc Miller, now in his 80s himself but still practicing, came to the house and did what he could, but they all knew Gabriel was dying. Flora sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and talking to him, telling him about their life together, about how much he had meant to her. Samuel and Grace came with their families, and the house was full of quiet grief and love. Gabriel's grandchildren came to say goodbye, and Gabriel managed to tell each of them that he loved them, that he was proud of them. But it was Flora he wanted next to him most. "Do not leave me," he whispered, his voice weak. "Never," Flora promised. "I am right here. I will always be right here." On a quiet morning in early spring, with the sun streaming through the bedroom window and Flora holding his hand, Gabriel drew his last breath. Flora sat beside him, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for making me believe I was worthy. I will love you forever." The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to drown Flora. Gabriel had been her partner for nearly 40 years, the foundation of her life. Without him, she felt unmoored, lost in a world that seemed suddenly cold and empty. But her family surrounded her, supporting her through the darkest days. Samuel took over running the ranch completely, though he consulted with Flora on decisions, valuing her wisdom and experience. Grace moved back into the main house for a few months, keeping her mother company and making sure she ate and slept. The grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with noise and life and love. Slowly, painfully, Flora learned to live without Gabriel's physical presence. But she felt him everywhere, in the house they had built, in the children they had raised, in the values they had instilled in their family. He was not truly gone, not as long as his love lived on in her and in their descendants. Flora continued to live on the ranch, finding comfort in the familiar routines and the land Gabriel had loved so much. She spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them and loving them, making sure they knew about their grandfather and the kind of man he had been. She continued her work in the community, still committed to making her corner of the world better. On what would have been Gabriel's 80th birthday, the family gathered at the ranch to honor his memory. They planted a tree near the house, an oak that would grow strong and tall, a living memorial to the man who had built this family. Flora stood beside it, her hand resting on the young trunk, and spoke to her children and grandchildren. "Your grandfather was the best man I ever knew," she said. "He taught me that everyone has worth, that everyone deserves kindness and respect. He showed me that love is not something you earn, but something you give freely. And he built this family on those principles. I want you all to remember that. I want you to carry those values forward, to treat people the way Gabriel treated them, with dignity and compassion." Everyone nodded, wiping away tears. Samuel spoke next, sharing stories about working alongside his father, learning not just about ranching but about integrity and honor. Grace spoke about how her father had encouraged her dreams, even when they were unconventional, teaching her that her worth was not dependent on fitting into society's expectations. The grandchildren shared their memories too, painting a picture of a kind, patient man who had time for everyone, who had made each of them feel special and valued. As the gathering wound down and people began to leave, Flora's youngest granddaughter, 7-year-old Rose, came to stand beside her. "Are you sad, Grandma?" Rose asked. "Yes, sweetheart, I am sad," Flora admitted. "I miss your grandfather very much." "But you are happy too?" Rose asked, tilting her head. "I can tell you are both." Flora looked down at the wise child and smiled. "You are very perceptive. Yes, I am happy too. Happy that I had him in my life. Happy for all the years we had together. Happy for this family we created. Sometimes you can be both sad and happy at the same time." Rose thought about that. "Like when it rains but the sun is shining." "Exactly like that," Flora said, hugging her granddaughter close. "Exactly like that." Flora lived for another 8 years after Gabriel's death, years filled with love and family and purpose. She saw more grandchildren born, attended Samuel's oldest son's wedding, and celebrated Grace's appointment as superintendent of schools for the county. She finished writing a second book, this one about marriage and partnership, and building a life based on mutual respect. She remained active in the community, though she slowed down as age took its toll. But her mind remained sharp, and her commitment to helping others never wavered. People would still come to her for advice and assistance, and she would help when she could, remembering always that she had once been the one in need of help. On a warm day in late summer, when Flora was 83 years old, she sat on the porch as she had done countless times before. The ranch spread out before her, prosperous and beautiful, full of cattle and horses, and the sound of her great-grandchildren playing in the yard. Samuel ran the ranch expertly now, with his own children learning the business. Grace's school was one of the best in the region. The family had grown large and strong, rooted in the values Gabriel and Flora had lived by. Flora felt tired but content. She had lived a full life, far beyond anything she had imagined possible as a lonely orphan girl. She had been loved and valued, had raised children who loved and valued others, had made a difference in her community. She had been worthy of everything good the world had to offer, just as Gabriel had always told her. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Flora closed her eyes. She could almost feel Gabriel beside her, his hand in hers, his voice in her ear. She smiled, peaceful and ready, and let herself go, knowing she was leaving behind a legacy of love that would continue long after she was gone. Flora Ross was buried beside Gabriel on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide California sky. Her gravestone read, "Worthy of everything good this world has." At the funeral, the church in Sierra City was packed with family and friends, people whose lives Flora had touched with her kindness and generosity. Samuel and Grace spoke about their mother, about her strength and compassion, about how she had taught them to see the worth in every person. "My mother came from nothing," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion, "but she became everything. She taught us that where you start does not determine where you finish, that love and perseverance can transform a life. She loved our father with everything she had, and he loved her the same way. Together, they built something beautiful, and we are all here because of that love." Grace spoke next, tears streaming down her face. "My mother believed in education and opportunity for everyone, regardless of their circumstances. She believed everyone had inherent worth and deserved to be treated with dignity. She lived those beliefs every day. The school she helped build, the people she helped, the family she raised, all of it is a testament to who she was. We will miss her every day, but we will honor her by continuing to live by her example." After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch. They told stories about Flora and Gabriel, laughing and crying, remembering. The oldest grandchildren shared memories with the youngest, making sure Flora's legacy would continue. Young Gabriel, now a man of 37 with children of his own, stood up and made an announcement. "I have been thinking about grandmother's book," he said, "about how she wanted people to know that they are worthy of good things. I would like to establish a foundation in my grandparents' names, something that provides assistance to people who need help getting on their feet. Just like grandfather helped grandmother, we can help others." The family agreed enthusiastically, and within a year the Ross Foundation was established, funded by a portion of the ranch's profits. It provided assistance to people in need, particularly women and children, helping them with housing, education, and opportunities to build better lives. It was a fitting tribute to Flora and Gabriel, continuing the work they had started in their own lives. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel's management, and eventually under his children's. The family remained close, gathering regularly for holidays and celebrations, always remembering the love that had founded their family. The story of Flora and Gabriel became family legend, told and retold to each new generation, a reminder of where they came from and what they valued. The oak tree planted in Gabriel's memory grew tall and strong, its branches spreading wide, offering shade and shelter. Beneath it, Children played and families gathered, just as Gabriel and Flora had dreamed. The ranch remained in the family, passing from generation to generation, a testament to hard work and integrity. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the California hills and the sky turned gold and orange, family members would stand on that porch where Flora and Gabriel had stood so many times, and they would remember. They would remember the love story that had started with a bullet and a rescue, with a man who saw worth where others saw nothing, with a woman who learned to believe she deserved good things. They would remember, and they would be grateful, and they would strive to live with the same love and integrity that Gabriel and Flora had shown. Because that was their legacy, not just the land or the money, but the values and the love that transformed everyone they touched. And in that way, Flora and Gabriel lived on, their love story continuing to inspire and guide, proving that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a simple act of kindness and the words, "You are worthy of everything good this world has." Those words, spoken in truth and love, had changed one woman's life and through her had changed countless others. It was a legacy worthy of remembering, worthy of honoring, worthy of continuing for generations to come. The story of Flora and Gabriel Ross became more than just family history. It became a lesson in the power of love to transform, to heal, to create something lasting and beautiful from the most unlikely beginnings. And that, more than anything else, was their true gift to the world.